This is the first piece in the book. The title is Share My Walk with God. It's introductory as to how the book came about. Irritated at the weakness my old age presented, I wrested a heavy case of paper from the cart into my van and tossed in a bag of ink cartridges to join the box. I tipped my rollator and rolled it into the side of the van where the seat had been lowered out of the way. There were visible mountains to the east and south of me, the way I was parked. This large store had no windows, though there was a fantastic view of the Chugach Mountains. Beauty didn't call to me today any more than it did to the builders of the windowless store. The lovely or unique in nature usually sang a siren song to me. Normally it would be my first focus. I didn't reach for my camera. I was busy with the draw of the spiritual world. I've been able for many years to enter the spiritual world either by my choice or by summons, without dependency on the natural world as a draw, though beauty of place certainly made entry more delightful. I was sharply drawn this day, drawn with urgency, but not any photogenic quality the mountains held. I felt a strong tugging, that insistent pull I knew well. It drew on something under my breastbone. I compare it to a spiritual snare. Strong and compelling, God was drawing me to Him relentlessly. Instantly, I was in communication with the Lord. My eyes were open, but vision was limited, so I could focus on what He had in mind. The spiritual space this time was cataract vision, foggy and dark. The Lord's presence added the only light which significantly brightened the scene but did not make it clearer. I had left this world. My body remained in the van. I saw with spiritual eyes. From the fog, a head formed, like the bust for statues of people in antiquity. The features were hard to discern, clearing very slowly. I realized the head was my own. It was hideously deformed. The skin on my head above my ears was a swollen protuberance, like too much belly fat overhanging blue jeans. I seemed to have a monstrous loose hat of fat on my head. It jiggled slightly. Grotesque. I turned to look at the spiritual representation the Lord gave me of Himself, horrified at what I'd seen. "What happened to my head?" I asked Him, alarmed. "It's a representation." "What?" "You could say it shows your spiritual obesity from never sharing our journey. You learn in order to share with others." I have known that since I was young. I've also kept my spiritual journey from others, as it was not what I considered shareable. It began in disobedience. Mom thought my talking with you was pretend, and she told me to stop. Of course, I didn't. That was acceptable for the past. For many, many years, you wanted to know what work I had for you. I recalled that day when I learned Mom didn't consider that today's people walked with God. She thought it was only for a few people in the Bible, a few people long ago. Certainly not something I should think I did. She insisted in a toughened voice I stop pretending such things. Such a long time ago. I disobeyed. "Indeed, Lord, I've wanted to know the work you have for me. I've waited for over 7 decades. My excitement grew. What I learned now? "Now," the Lord said, "you learn." He always knew exactly what I was thinking. After so long waiting, I was surprised. Finally, after all these years, He'd tell me the special work He wanted me to do. My excitement expanded. He told me, "You are to write your spiritual journey with me. 'Write a book so others may share your walk with me.'" This struck me speechless. Had he told me to light myself a fire, I could not have been any less shocked. His words impacted me as I stood there unprotected against a tornado. My book would have to be as perfect as possible. Utter truth. There was no video of my life I could refer to. No journals existed. I'd shredded the few of them I had before moving to Alaska. Nothing to help with the details. I was sinking in on myself, overwhelmed, daunted. The Lord caught my attention again. I waited to tell you until now because, had you known, it would have influenced your choices in life, turning you into someone you are not. I laughed for the first time, lightening up since he told me my job. I might have been a lot easier for you to deal with, Lord. I chose you as you are, not as you might think I want you to be. Well, that shut me back down. I had to ponder that. Lord, if I were to write down this whole spiritual journey, it would take volumes. There are things you cannot share. Share what you remember. Share what was important to you. If you start to reveal anything I don't want shared, I'll stop you. I whispered, okay. I could think of nothing else to say. What a job! Never in my life had I been so bewildered. Rational organization was one of my strong points, but this left me having no clue how to begin. He put his hand on my shoulder. You can do it. I'm pleased with your book. Suddenly I could see the book forming from the fog, the book I was going to write. My vision was unclear, but I could see the image of the book, the final product of something not begun. This was a new experience for me. I struggled with the job he laid out for me to do. It was too big, surely. I wanted to hide. Not acceptable. The monstrous job hit me hard. On the other hand, his comment that he was pleased with the book was harder to accept than having to write it. I knew he knew everything I was thinking. How perplexing. He'd never had me this undone. For a second I almost spoke, but before my words were out I realized I was still so befuddled I'd forgotten he does not exist constrained by time. We were outside of time. The book, however, would find its form in time. Sharing this experience will bring the visual of your obese head to a normal size, for you'll lose much of what you've carried alone all these years. You dipped your toes into writing the spiritual in your prehistoric work. Now it's time for a full swim. A swim to share the spiritual on paper. With the spiritual you've gathered for decades, but shared none. It's time to let it out. Have no fear. I sat there and continued in that lovely spiritual silence I could share with him. My physical size exceeded by my spiritual size. As with many times with him, I grew faster than I am while taking in spiritual things and needed time to find normal again, to decompress and return to life changed as the non-verbal aspects of our encounter became verbal in my mind. This time it felt like quite some time, but since we were outside time, it could have been a single millisecond. I had to let the information I gained swirl through my brain and heart. No longer could I be angry, knowing he had work for me to do, but not knowing what it was. Now I knew, and it was overpowering me. I was not more comfortable to know. Of all the grains of sand on earth, both above and below water, I was just one grain of sand. This job he gave me made me acutely aware of my importance. Non-existent. One tiny grain among all the others. Why did he decide I must do this? I didn't ask. There were so many others more suited to this, unquestionably. I felt transparent. He knew what I was thinking. As I merged back into the physical, I recalled my earlier purchase and laughed in release of tension. I had certainly made the right purchase, computer, paper, and ink. Finally my answer, and it gobsmacked me, leaving me speechless, but I knew. After more than 7 decades, I knew. I belted up and turned the key in the ignition, fully back to the physical world, wondering what I'd do with this new knowledge. How would I begin this book? Definitely nonfiction, not a biography. Alice Cudlip, a close friend, would tell me it was an apologia, though a positive one. That went over my head. I had to research to find what she meant. Rebecca Goodrich, another friend, would recommend I view it as a memoir, since that would make sense to the reading public. It turns out it's both. I had never read either genre. I felt disconnected from the world, though I was back. How could I share in words what happened in my spiritual walk with God? I'd have to learn. Even in old age, there are learning mountains to climb to enable what might otherwise be mistaken for a simple task. I was about to climb my Denali, and right now I need a rollator and oxygen just to walk a 1/4 mile.